Namadan Jambe Yana Gibe Shaza Lu Kashi Chanjo Shinwa Chondo Dude Bonje Sadan Kala Gunkabjin Dorje Donton Dane Kolo Meda Dan Kare Chenwe Chalbe Ba Zutula Nambara Tuje Dode Mendo Dajin Chanjo Doche Zambana Chambe Tugi Lebara Pamze Zobe Sange Kanye de la Gucha Kege Shenge Tunle Do Samda Jorwa Penzo Be Chanjua Tamba Tugi Tse Saya Nambara Chudo Yo Jenda Tsujime Leju Shin Sudan Zenji Gombara Ze Samden Shera Tarjimbe Parulo Chinzo Keja Za Jogun Tambo Damba Nam Jiden Keba Tamje Ga Denama Shendo Toba Gi Mode Jeba Tada Ja Tele Kege Demba Ni Nime Veshin Chile Nga Namba Kundo Milu Be Sala Kela Dagya Pye Kege Sura Singe Ja Larje Jiden Tabana Tsanda Gyabju Gubara Gyu Laye Lama Vadara Shima Tuba Kame Joka Dam Changson Geba Nejon So Chaba Toba Teta Kun Chila De Kege Changju Chonye Ne Zhenze Ngo Tsara Che Sebe Sele Majoba Guso Dangwe Babu Dan Nige Guso Mise Ba Kela Pembara Chawu Shi Gome Daja Jeson Wa Gombo Kela Da Gyabchi Gyawe Dude Duwa Da Mude Mali Pamze Ninde Loma Chame Jo Gase Damba Dungde Deje De Tso Tongwa Na Kige Yende Tenirebe Chanjo Ledo Juba Da Laryan Kela Da Gyabchi Kige Sene Jambe Yang Loma Shara Da Debu Chamba Gyaza Damba Ze Simshi Sushi Tezom Sa Kige Yende Meche Ca Sege Yende Tongwe Kum Gyaren Sharwe Si Jege Peme Nyinge Vese Go Chida Wadan Chinye Chi Kige Namba Gunye Be Shebe Chinle Tenshindo Juba Kela Daja Za Tedara Jove Lama Shageri Pura Jimbe Dongi Le Jumba Jumde Zbe Sange De Bai Jove Gunke Nyudo Tobara Sho Lama dang gombo jeje jambe yang la kube cha za lo kange le je jimye jinda ni dara nam da rab sa chinye denge chi she si ji ni ge tugra le bam zin kanda sibe tsara ma re min tum dong a gi sebe 조조 근라 부지 다제 야라 주제 양된 송 주더라 제조 니모 니로 내게 자조 조제 징 아래 메세 동라 요고 진예 제제 남 되네 다제 사주 타스 연대 르조 갸세 두고 주다 주다 주니 겐제 다르 메세 잠베 양라데 시자 탐제 세베 제양 바 조긴 게레 주베 투제 사메 칠레 제베 동아와 정게 라메 샤블라 그자차 젠데 케게 케라베세게 달레 데모 메바랍사네 가다 덴제 숑로 도바 예 러제 보베 나와 자도소 사시에 베제 조시에면 도담 레라니시 니데 겐바데 상게 신도 미데 풀와이 조게 남다 신라제 바라쇼 심제 남게 삼바다 로예 제다 제다 최종 특모 대바인 최계 고로 고도소. Touch the leg. Greetings to all. So today we'll be learning about the generosity which is to be practiced by an advanced bodhisattva who has attained the fearless acceptance of the birthless factors of existence. In other words, the generosity which is to be practiced by the bodhisattva who has attained the first level or the first stage of a bodhisattva, and anything higher or above that stage up until the 10th stage. So we have earlier discussed about the generosity which is to be practiced by the ordained bodhisattvas, and also those to be practiced by the ordinary lay bodhisattvas. Now we are going to be speaking about the ordinary lay bodhisattva, the lay bodhisattvas, but not ordinary, but rather those who have directly perceived emptiness, those that are on the Arya level, the Arya level, or you could say the noble bodhisattvas.
大家吉祥如意。我们今天讲的是证悟者的布施。这里证悟者的布施就是指已经证得无生法忍的菩萨，也就是指证悟了从一地或者更高直到十地之间的菩萨。我们之前讲了在家出家菩萨的布施的行为，我们这里所要讲的就是已证得无生法忍的证悟者的菩萨的布施。
So in order to speak of this, the generosity to be practiced by an advanced bodhisattva who has attained fearless acceptance of the birthless factors of existence is of three special kinds. Renunciation to a high degree, great renunciation. So I already mentioned this once, but just to remind you, when we say Bodhisattva who has attained fearless acceptance of the birthless factors of existence, what that means is the Bodhisattva who has directly perceived the nature of emptiness. Not all Bodhisattvas can directly perceive the nature of emptiness as it is, especially the lay or ordinary lay Bodhisattvas. Let's say the Bodhisattvas who are sentient beings who have not attained the noble stage or the Arya level. So only it is those who have attained, starting from the first level of the Bodhisattva up until you could say enlightenment, from those type of Bodhisattvas have directly perceived the nature of emptiness. So we are speaking of that type of Bodhisattva.
这里我们之前也讲到过一次，但再重复一遍。这里说的证悟者，就是指已经证得无生法忍的菩萨，也就是直接能够现见一切，本质是空性的菩萨。这并不是所有的菩萨都是如此。比如说在家菩萨或者出家菩萨，他们还是有情众生，而是只有真正的圣者，就是证悟了无生法忍的菩萨，才能够现见一切诸法是空性。这里指的是这样的菩萨。
So there's generally speaking 10 stages, 10 paths to attain enlightenment, which needs to go in order. The first we call Tsoglam, which is the path of accumulation, in which we strive in accumulating the accumulations of merit and wisdom. And this we are on the path of accumulation when we are sentient beings, ordinary sentient beings. Then the second is the path known as the path of arriving. We are still sentient beings, but we are almost arriving to the first level of a bodhisattva. That's why that path is called the path of arriving. So these are the first two paths.
获得证悟的果位之前的话，一共有10道。第一道就是资粮道，就是我们在这个过程当中，我们是在不断的积累福慧二资粮，就是我们还是处于有情的时候，在积累这两种资粮。第二个道是加行道，就是我们快要证悟到一地的时候，但我们这个时候还是有情，就这段时间当中，我们是快要证悟到一地的。
And then the third path is called the seeing, because it arrives, then you see emptiness exactly as it is, directly for the first time, while you are on the path of accumulation and the path of arriving, which is when you are a sentient being. The first and second paths, while you're on that, you are a sentient being. The third path is called the path of seeing, because when you arrive on that path, then you directly perceive emptiness. And the moment you arrive, or the moment or the beginning of the third path, arriving on the third path, or you could say the moment you arrive on the third path is the same moment you attain the first level of a bodhisattva.
之前我们说的第一道和第二道就是资粮道和加行道的时候，这还是指我们还是有情的时候。第三个就是见道，见道就是我们直接的看见到空性，这就是我们第一次直接看见到一切诸法本质是空性。之前我们在加行道的时候，就是我们还是有情快要证悟依谛的时候，在那个时候我们也可以观修空性，但是直到见道之前，直到我们步入到见道的时候，也就是说我们第一次现见空性的时候，也就是我们证悟依谛的时候。
Starting from the third path, then you progress up until the 10th path, until the 10th level of a bodhisattva. And during that time, we also, meanwhile, in the middle of that, we arrive at the path of meditation, which is the fourth path. And that is because after having attained the third path, so after having attained the third path, which is the path of seeing, and having first directly perceived emptiness, we need to then maintain that emptiness, or maintain that meditation. So we need to meditate on it again and again, on what we have perceived directly, which is the emptiness. So that is why it is called the path of meditation. That is the fourth path.
老子说不好意思，他那边的网络不是特别好。那从我们第三道开始，就是见到之后开始的话，也就是从我们证悟依谛之后，一直到证悟实谛之间的修行。那我们在第一次现见了空性之后的话，为了保持这个见解，那我们就是一直不断的修行。那这个道就是叫修道，也就是说我们在第一次现见了空性之后，为了保持这个境界，我们直到一步一步直到实谛之间，一直就保持这个修行，也就是叫修道。
And then finally, the fifth path is called the path of normal learning, because when we attain enlightenment, we arrive at the fifth path. It's the same. Arriving at the fifth path is the same as attaining enlightenment. So there are these 5 paths which we have to go to in order to attain enlightenment.
那第5个就是无修道，就是在我们证得实谛之后的话，就是我们就是无有所可修的，那就是这个无修道。
So in our case, we are mostly on the first path, you could say. It's most likely.
那我们现在大多数的时间的话，我们可以说我们还是在处于第一道，就是资粮道。
And here, when we speak of the Bodhisattva here, who has attained the fearless acceptance of the birthless factors of existence, we are speaking about the Bodhisattva who is residing on the third path and the fourth path.
那我们这里讲的证悟者的布施，就是讲证得无生法忍的菩萨的布施。这里主要讲的是第3道、第4道，也就是见道和修道的菩萨。
So we need to now understand what is the kind of generosity which this Bodhisattva needs to practice, because it's still a Bodhisattva. It's not the Bodhisattva is still not fully enlightened, so they still need to practice. They still need to accumulate the causes for attaining enlightenment. That would be practicing generosity. But the generosity which they practice is a bit different from what we have discussed earlier for those who are ordained, the bodhisattvas who are ordained, and the lay bodhisattvas. So the type here, in order to understand the generosity which this type of bodhisattva practices, there are three: renunciation, renunciation to a high degree, and great renunciation. So these are the three different types of generosity which this Bodhisattva practices.
这里证得无生法忍的菩萨，他们要做的就是，他们还要为了要获得正悟的因，为了要获得正悟，他们还要所修持的因，也就是他们还需要布施。可是他们修的布施和我们之前讲的出家菩萨、在家菩萨，他们所修的布施有所不同。那具体细分的话，就有3种，就是布施、大布施和极大布施。
So in order to speak of the first, which is renunciation, the first is to give up rulership of your domain. So what this means is to give up your kingdom. If you have a kingdom, then you have to give up the kingdom. And that's a really big type of generosity, because it's usually, in our eyes, it's not easy to give up their kingdom. Anybody would want to keep their kingdom. They wouldn't want to give up their kingdom. But the bodhisattvas who are on the first level of a bodhisattva and any advanced bodhisattva higher than that, when practicing generosity, will, if they're, for example, like a king, then they would then practice this kind of generosity, which is giving up their kingdom.
那第一种布施就是指国王布施、国政等。那在我们眼里来说的话，如果自己有一个王国，要想放弃这个王国，就是放弃我们自己的国政的时候，就会觉得这不是一件非常容易的事情。我们都会想非常保留自己所拥有的权利。但是对于正悟的菩萨来说，如果这位菩萨是一位国王的话，那他就会修持如此的布施。
And then the second type, which is renunciation to a high degree. So what that is as it says here, the second is to give away those dear to you, such as your son or wife. So in this case, the advanced level bodhisattva will give away their children or their wife and the like, those who are dear to them, their own family, to others. So that is also not an easy kind of generosity. It's a very, very high level type of generosity to practice, and this type of bodhisattva practices it.
第二种布施就是大布施，就是指放弃自己的妻子、放弃自己的孩子、家人等等，把自己的最亲爱的家人布施给别人。那这一点也是非常不容易的，也是非常高等的布施。
And then lastly, there is the great renunciation. And in this case, it is the third is to give away part or all of your body, such as the gift of your head, legs, or arms. So this is what we, in many cases, read of in the stories of the Buddha, where he also at times cuts his head or legs or arms or any of his body part, or even at times gives his whole body for the sake of others as a part of his generosity. So this kind of is practiced by the advanced level bodhisattva as well.
第三种就是极大布施，就好像我们知道很多佛陀在因地的时候的故事，会切自己的头、手、身体等等，或者会布施自己全部的身体，就只为了利益他人。那这一些都是指证悟者的布施。
And we can go to the next slide.
然后我们可以看下一页。
With this in mind, the Buddha taught at great length in the perfection of wisdom, the passage beginning, when through skillful means you have completely perfected the perfection of generosity, you will attain the body of a great person, such as a universal emperor, and will say, take all my possessions from me and give them away in acts of generosity, observe moral discipline. And later in that passage it reads, if after giving away my body, I have no attachment even toward this physical body, it goes without saying, I will have none toward external objects of wealth. So what this means is that with what in mind with what was mentioned earlier about the three three types of generosity, which the advanced level of Bodhisattva practices. The Buddha taught in the perfection of wisdom, which is the category of his teaching, one of the categories of his teaching. And it says in there, the Buddha himself taught that when the advanced level Bodhisattvas have completely perfected their practice of generosity, and they will then attain very great high rebirths, and will assume many great important forms, such as that of a universal emperor, or just a king, or it could be a minister, or it can be a merchant, or anyone of importance. And when they assume these different kinds of forms, they will give away all of their possessions to others. And while they give it away to others, the bodhisattvas these advanced level bodhisattvas will also say and tell other people that I have given all of these to you. You can take it, and after having taken it, you should also share it to others and pass on the gifts to others. And you should practice moral conduct and the like. And in this way, the bodhisattvas give all the recipients advice, and in this way, as along with the giving.
这接下来讲的就是就是讲具体3种就是包含的3种布施的一个具体的一个例子。就佛在般若佛母经中，也就是佛的教法的一部分，就是在般若部的一部佛经当中就说过，智者如果圆满自己的布施度的话，就会转身为比如说如转轮圣王、如国王、商人等等这样子的身体。那在转身到这样子的身体之后，这样子的地位之后，这些圣者就会放弃自己所有的财产，并会把自己的财产布施给他人。在布施的同时，也会告诉他人，你也应该舍弃这些财产，你也应该把这些财产去布施给其他的人，并同时你也应该守持戒律等等。那就是说，这一些菩萨在把财物布施给他人的同时，也传予他人一些教言，让他人行持布施及守持戒律等。
And then on top of that, they will also tell the recipients while the bodhisattvas, for example, cut their limbs and give it away or anything like that, while they're doing in the process or in the middle of that act, the bodhisattvas will also say that if I have no attachment to my physical body, then there's no need to say I also don't have attachment to the outer objects as well.
同时，这一些佛在布施自己的身体的时候，比如说切下自己的肋骨布施给他人的时候，也会告诉受施者，我对自己的身体都没有任何的贪执，更何况对身外的财物等受用呢，也是没有贪执的。
And we can go to the next slide.
让我们看下一页。
Some apply this scriptural passage to the generosity to be practiced by the ordained bodhisattvas. Those people have simply not understood the intended sense of the sutras. So what it's saying is that what the quote that we just mentioned earlier from that perfection of, as it says, the perfection of the wisdom sutras, that quote, some people interpret it in a wrong way. So there's some Tibetans during Sakya time who interpreted it in the wrong way and thought that that was referring to the generosity which is to be practiced by ordained bodhisattvas. But that is not the case, because as we mentioned earlier, in the sutra which we call Papanyavakurkishupito, but anyway, in that sutra we mentioned earlier, we divided the generosity that the bodhisattvas practices in 3 types. First, the type, the generosity which is to be practiced by ordained, then a lay bodhisattva, and then finally the advanced lay bodhisattva. So there are 3, but this type of person who is interpreting it in the wrong way, they simply have not studied the sutras well enough to understand that they are not they haven't studied it well enough to understand the differences in the ways that the three bodhisattvas, the three types of bodhisattvas practice their generosity, or you could say the differences of their generosity. So therefore, that is simply not right. What the passages that were mentioned earlier refer to the, on regard, you could say, to the generosity which is practiced by the advanced level bodhisattvas, and not, it is not speaking about those that have ordained.
当时在参加班智达的时代的时候，有一些藏人就误解了刚才讲的般若佛母经中的这个教言。有人会误解，就以为这一些布施的方法是出家菩萨必须要所修持的布施，但这样子的想法就是没有分清楚在家菩萨、出家菩萨以及证悟者菩萨的不同的布施。我们之前几节课里面，在优婆里请文经当中也说过，不同的菩萨有不同的布施。那如果说有这样子误解的话，就是没有分清楚在家、出家以及证悟者菩萨不同行持的布施而所引起的。
Now you should think about, and the teacher should also teach to others, the import of the account in the Jatakas about Visvantara's bestowing his son and daughter on a Brahmin as his servants, and so on. So what she's saying here is that now at this point, the listener should contemplate, or you should listen and think about it. And also the teacher who is teaching this, clarifying the sage's intent, should also mention some examples in support of some example stories, you could say, in support of what was mentioned earlier on the practice of the advanced level, on the generosity, the advanced level bodhisattva.
这里经文当中又说，我们作为听法者的话，应该听一些不同的公案。这里的传法者也应该教一些之前讲的证悟者布施的一些具体的不同的公案来学习。
And the stories are from the Jataka tales, which is the account on the previous lives of the Buddha, and this was taught by the Buddha himself. Because he remembered his past lives. And so among the many stories, the first is the story about the prince known by the name of Visvantara.
这里就是要具体讲一些本身传当中的故事，也就是佛陀在因地的时候的一些故事。这些故事都是佛亲口所教的，因为佛能够意念往昔的宿命。第一个故事就是讲须达难太子的故事。
So there was once a prince known as Vishvantara, and this prince was very kind. He really wanted to help the people of his kingdom. And so one day he went around on a tour in his kingdom to see how the people were doing, how his subjects were doing. And then when he went on the tour, he noticed that many of his subjects were very poor. They were suffering from poverty. And so after having seen that, he returned back to the palace and requested his father by saying that I've seen the situation outside of the palace and the people are not faring well. So therefore, we have a treasury here in the palace. Can we open this treasury? He asked the king, his father, if they could open the treasury and share the gifts in the treasury to all of the subjects, the poor people in his kingdom. And so you can translate till there first.
这个须达难太子的故事就是讲这个须达难太子，他是个非常善良的一个太子，他非常想帮助他王国里的人。有一天，他去拜访他王国里的臣民，看到许许多多的人都受到贫穷的痛苦，于是他就回到他的殿中寻找他的父亲，因为殿中有一个巨大的宝藏盒，他就想把这个宝藏拿出来分享给他的臣民。
And the father agreed to that, and then the prince shared all of the gifts from the treasury to the poor, and many of the poor people then were, do not have to continue experiencing that suffering or poverty due to that. And in that way, the prince became very famous for his acts of generosity. And around that time, the prince's father, the king, had an enemy who was also a king. And that enemy king was always trying to defeat the prince's father and to take over the kingdom, but that enemy king never really succeeded at all, no matter how much he tried. And the enemy king understood that the reason why he was not able to defeat the prince's father was because that the king, the prince's father, had a very powerful or strong elephant used in war. And whenever this elephant was around, then any other army would always lose the war. So therefore, the enemy king thought of a plan and thought that he should ask the prince for the elephant. And he thought that surely the prince would not decline that request. And so the enemy king then asked the prince for the elephant. And the prince, because he was a great Bodhisattva, did not really care too much. So he gave the elephant to the enemy king and told the enemy king not to talk about it too much, otherwise his own father would be angry and the prince would land in trouble. So the prince requested the enemy king to be careful and not, sharing the news. And in that way, the prince gave away the elephant, which was their own kingdom's strongest weapon, to the enemy king.
当时国王就同意了，把这个宝藏就分享给他们，分享给这个王国里的臣民。于是这个王子就拿了这个宝藏，就分享给所有的臣民，使许多的臣民就摆脱了贫穷的痛苦。然后这个王子也因为他的布施，在这个国王当中变得非常有名。当时这个国王他有一个敌对的一个国王，一直非常想要打败这个国王，收复这个王国，但是每次进攻都不成功。因为这个敌国的国王他知道这个国王有一个非常强大的一头大象，这个大象每次在他们打仗的时候总是会打赢这个敌国。于是这个敌国的国王就想了一个办法，他知道这位王子非常的慷慨，于是就问这个王子要这头大象。这个敌国的王子问了之后，因为这个王子是菩萨，就答应了这个敌国的国王。于是就把他们最珍贵的大象送给了这个敌国的国王，并且告诉这个敌国的国王不要多说此事，因为他自己的父亲会生气，所以让他不要到处多说，就把这个他们国家当中最珍贵的宝物，就这个大象，就是这匹大象，送给这个敌国的国王。这个大象非常的珍贵，因为这个是能够让他们每一次在战争中都打赢对方的一个武器。
And when the ministers of the king found out that the prince had given away the elephant to the enemy king, they were outraged, and the ministers informed the king of different ways to punish the prince for what he had done. And some ministers said, this is truly not acceptable at all, what the prince has done. We need to pluck out his eyes, and some ministers said we need to cut off his arms, and some said we need to cut off his legs, and some said they need to cut off his head, and so on. But the king replied that, yes, although the prince broke the rules by giving away the elephant to the enemy, what he did was still an action of the Dharma. It's what he did was still a dharmic action or a Dharma practice. So therefore, we shouldn't kill him, but we should rather send the prince into exile for 12 years.
当时这个王国的管理者发现了这件事情的时候，就非常的气愤，于是就和国王说了这件事情，并扬言要惩罚这个王子，说把大象送给敌国是不能接受的。很多管理者他们就纷纷商量要惩罚王子，比如说要挖了他的眼睛，或者切了他的手臂，切了他的腿，甚至切了他的头等等。当时国王说，确实是就是做的不对，他把这个大象给了这个敌国的国王，但是他所做的这一切还是如法，还是如法，所以不应该把他杀了。于是他们商量之后，决定让这个王子驱逐出境12年。
And in that way, the prince went into exile, and he also had a princess, wife. He had a wife, and also he had a son and a daughter, a prince and princess. So there was 4 members in of his family. So the prince, along with his wife, son and daughter, were all together exiled, and then they went into a forest. And around in that area, there was a Brahmin, a Hindu Brahmin, and who was living with his Brahmin wife. And the Brahmin was usually very abusive towards his wife. And physical or verbally abusive. And so finally the Brahmin wife told the Brahmin that I can no longer serve you. We cannot go on living like this. So if you need somebody to serve you, you better look for someone else. And so when she told him that, the Brahmin then searched for, you could say, slaves. And the Brahmin met the prince at that moment. And the Brahmin asked the prince for the prince to give the prince's son and daughter to the Brahmin. And the prince agreed to that. And so the prince gave away his son and daughter to the Brahmin.
但是这个王子带着他的妻子、他的儿子以及他的女儿，一家4口就被驱逐出境之后，就来到了一个森林当中。这个森林当中有一个婆罗和一个婆罗门女。这个婆罗门对他的妻子非常的暴力，不管是语言还是身体上都非常的暴力。于是这个婆罗门女就告诉这个婆罗门说，她不能再服侍他了，她要另寻他人，去做他的奴隶。后来这个婆罗门在森林当中遇到了王子，就向王子索要他的孩子，就是他的儿子和女儿做他的奴隶。于是这个王子就同意了这个婆罗门。
And then after having given that, then sometime later there was another Brahmin, and this Brahmin did not have a wife. And so the Brahmin came to the prince again and asked for the prince to give away the prince's wife. And so then again, the prince gave away his own wife to another Brahmin. And then in that way, he had given away all of his family members to others. And so he was left living alone.
后来在森林当中，这个王子又遇到了另外一个婆罗门。这个婆罗门他因为没有了妻子，所以向这个王子索要他的妻子。于是这个王子就放弃了他的妻子。那这个时候他就之前放弃了他的儿子和他的女儿，现在又放弃了妻子，那等于他就放弃了他的全家人，一个人就独自住在森林里。
And then meanwhile, the first Brahmin who had taken the prince's son and daughter as his slaves, he found out that the son and daughter were too young to really work for him. They were too young. They were children. And he found out that they couldn't really work. So the Brahmin thought to sell the son and daughter, because the son and daughter of the prince were of no use to himself. So he went around town. The Brahmin traveled around along with the son and daughter of the prince in order to sell them. And on his travels, he finally arrived at the former kingdom, or you could say the kingdom from which the prince had lived, or you could say were the father of the prince, which was the king. So he arrived at that kingdom. The Brahmin arrived at that kingdom. And around that time, somebody in the kingdom noticed that the children that the Brahmin was bringing along with him were the prince and the princess of the prince. In other words, the grandchildren of the king.
第一个婆罗门，也就是向这个王子索要他的儿子和女儿的这个婆罗门，后来发现他们的这个儿子和女儿因为太小，不能为这个婆罗门做什么，于是这个婆罗门就决定把这个儿子，把这两个孩子给卖了。于是他就踏上旅途，就是到处寻找地方把这两个孩子给卖了。后来他到了王子所住的那个王国当中，想要把这两个孩子给卖了。那个时候就有人注意到，这个婆罗门在兜售的两个孩子是王子和王妃的孩子，也就是国王的孙子和孙女。
And at that time, the king and the people, everyone became so enraged that a Brahmin was trying to sell the grandson and the granddaughter, the grandchildren of the king, out as slaves. So they became so angry that they were about to beat the Brahmin up for that. And right around that time, the children who were with the Brahmin told the people that, and they requested the people not to beat up the Brahmin. And they told the people that our father, the prince, sold us or gave us away to the Brahmin. So therefore we belong to the Brahmin right now. We are under his, we are sort of like working under him. So he is kind of like a boss, or he's looking after us. So please don't beat him. We belong to him. And so after the children said that, then the king spared the Brahmin and bought his own grandchildren from the Brahmin and reinstated them as sort of the prince and the princess of the kingdom. And soon after that, the Bodhisattva, the Vishvantara, also later arrived back in the kingdom, and also the wife also somehow came back to the kingdom. And later on, the whole family reunited in the kingdom after having gone through such difficulties.
那时这个王国里的所有的人都特别的气愤，因为他们看到婆罗门在以奴隶的身份在卖王子和王妃的孩子们。当时他们就要想打这个婆罗门，在当时他们要打这个婆罗门的时候，这两个小孩就说不要打这个婆罗门，是我的父亲，就是这个王国的王子，把我们布施给了这个婆罗门，我们现在是为他工作啊，他在照顾我们，说就是我们现在是属于这个婆罗门的。说辞之后，这个国王就没有再打这个婆罗门，而是把这两个孩子又买了回来，让他们登上了王位。之后后来这个王国的王子以及王妃，因为种种原因，后来又都回到了这个国王，又都团聚在了一起。
And then, so that is an example of giving. And in this regard, it is sort of, you could say that this Prince Vishvantara gave away his children. So it is like the second type of giving of the advanced level of a bodhisattva.
这就是一个布施的一个例子。那这个例子就是，就这个须达那太子这个布施的例子，就是属于刚才证悟者布施当中的第二个，就是大布施。
Then there's the story of the CV kings giving his eye to a blind man. So to speak of this story, this CV king is one of the past lives of the Buddha Shakyamuni, and he was very generous as well. And he was so generous that the king of the gods, who's known as Indra, wanted to test the generosity of the CV king.
接下来这个故事就是讲这个邪比巴国王，也就是在佛前世当中，佛在因地的时候转世的一个国王。这国王是非常非常的慷慨，他慷慨到帝释想要试一下这个国王到底有多慷慨。
And so the king of gods, Indra, disguised himself in the form of a blind Brahmin. And then this blind Brahmin approached the CV king and requested for the king to give away his eyes to the blind Brahmin. And the king agreed to that. The CV king agreed to take out his eyes and give it to the blind Brahmin. So in order to restore the Brahmin's eyesight. And so the king plucked out his eyes and gave it to the Brahmin. And when that happened, the Brahmin asked the king, "Are you not feeling pain?" And the king replied that, "I'm not feeling pain." And then the Brahmin said, "Is that true?" And the king said, "Yes, it is true. And if I'm really telling the truth, may my eyes, if I'm really telling the truth that I don't regret feeling pain," because the Brahmin asked the king, "Are you feeling pain and do you regret it?" And the king replied that, "I do not regret it." That was his answer. "I do not regret it." And the Brahmin said, "Is that true?" And the king said that it is true. If I truly do not regret having given my eyes to you, if that is true, that I don't regret it, then may my eyes be once again restored to its former state. And so right at that moment, because he said those words of truth, the king's eyes were naturally restored.
当时这个第10天就转变为一个转变为一个眼睛看不见的一个婆罗门，就是一个盲婆罗门，问这个国王索要他的眼睛，使他自己恢复视力。于是这个国王就同意了这个婆罗门，就把他自己的眼睛挖了出来，给了这个婆罗门。于是这个婆罗门在接受了这个国王的眼睛之后，就问国王，难道不感觉疼吗？国王说不疼。于是婆罗门又问，你说的是否属实？国王说属实。婆罗门又问，那你是不是因为你给了这个眼，你把你的双眼给了我，有没有产生后悔心？国王说没有产生后悔心，并且如果我说的是属实的话，也就是我把我的眼睛给了你，并不感觉到后悔的话，就因为就让我的眼睛当下恢复光明。那也因为这个国王他说的确实是属实，他说了这句话的当下的时候，他的双眼就恢复了视力。
And then, as it says here, the hare's gift of his body to a wandering Brahmin. So this is also one of the past lives of the Buddha. The hare is basically sort of similar to a rabbit, you could say. So the rabbit is a story about a rabbit. And in this life of the Buddha, he was a rabbit, and he was also a very advanced level Bodhisattva. And this rabbit lived in a forest, and the rabbit was full of knowledge, had great knowledge, and due to that, all of the wild animals living in the forest would often join the rabbit and listen to the Dharma teachings from the rabbit. And also this rabbit was very courageous, and courageous enough to give away his own body to anyone in need.
另外一个故事就是佛在前世的时候转生为一个兔子的时候的一个故事。当时佛转生为这个兔子的时候，这个兔子同时也是一个修行非常好的一个菩萨。当时在这个境地的时候，就有许多其他的动物来向这个兔子听法。这个兔子同时也是非常的勇敢，在需要的时候会愿意布施自己的身体。
And so again, the king of the gods, Lord Indra, wanted to test the generosity of this rabbit. And so Indra assumed the form of a wandering Brahmin, a Brahmin who was very thirsty, was very hungry, was old, was tired of traveling or walking. So Indra seemed such a disguise of a Brahmin in a very poor state. And so the rabbit saw this Brahmin walking through the forest, and the rabbit thought to himself that there's this Brahmin here who was very old, who was very hungry, thirsty, who is tired and not in good state, so and not in good condition. So how about I kill myself and offer my body to him in order to satisfy the Brahmin's hunger, so he won't die out of starvation. So the rabbit thought of that to himself. And then after having thought of that, the rabbit jumped into a fire in order to kill himself, so that the Brahmin could eat his meat and survive. But because the thought of helping others was so strong in the rabbit, when he jumped into the fire, the thought that he had was full of benefiting others, especially the Brahmin, because that thought was so strong and powerful and so good. Even though the rabbit jumped into the fire, he was not burned.
当时第10天也是为了想要尝试，就是想要测探这个转生为兔子的这个菩萨，他的慷慨的心，他的布施心有多强，于是就转生为一个也就转变为一个在这个寂静地当中到处兜转的一个婆罗门，形象是非常的饥渴，非常的饥饿。当时这个兔子看到了这个婆罗门，心里想啊，我眼前有这个年纪非常大的一个婆罗门，他又渴又饿，状态又非常的不好，那何不我自己把自己杀了，让他可以吃我自己的身体，让此的话他就不会饿死。兔子这样想了之后的话，就马上跳入了火中，就为了这样子的话，可以把自己杀死，可以让婆罗门吃自己的身体。但由于这个兔子它当时的他的这个念头是非常的强大，充满了想要帮助他人的心，以及这一个意愿也非常的强大，就算他当时跳入了火坑当中，也没有烧死。
And when that happened, when the rabbit jumped into the fire and still was not burned, when Indra saw that, he became very embarrassed for having tested the rabbit. And immediately after that, Indra carried up the rabbit and took the rabbit up to Indra's heaven, the heaven of the 33, and took the rabbit there. And Indra wanted to make sure that the people of future generations and of future times would not forget of the great act and the courage and the kindness of the rabbit. So he did not want people to forget about what the rabbit did. And so in order for everyone to remember the actions of the rabbit, it is said that Indra sort of carved or made the shape of a rabbit appear on the moon. So therefore, some people, as you can see, if you look at the moon, you'll see the shape of a rabbit. So it is said that it is connected with the story of one of the Buddha's past lives, in which the rabbit tried to offer his own body to the Brahmin, who was actually Indra in disguise. And so Indra, being very impressed, carved, or you could say, put that image on the moon, so everyone could remember the kindness of the rabbit, which was none other than one of the Buddha's past lives.
但是这个兔子就是毫不后悔的跳入了这个火坑当中的时候，第10天在看到了这一幕的时候，心里就觉得非常的羞愧，觉得自己不应该这样去测试这个兔子的它到底慷慨心以及布施的心有多强大。于是他就决定，他把这个兔子就带去了33天，以及他为了确保来世的人不会忘记这个兔子的善行，他的善心以及他的勇敢的心，就使月亮上印有这个兔子的形象，也就是我们现在所知道的月兔的由来。当时 第10天就把这个兔子的形象印在了月亮上，这样子的话，后人再看到月亮上有兔子的形象的话，就能够应验起这个兔子的善行。那这个兔子的话，也跟之前的故事一样，也都是佛陀的转世，也都是佛陀在因地的时候的化身。
And we can go to the next slide.
那我们看下一页。
And so forth. And also what is related in the sutras about King Chandraprabha's gift of his head to a Brahmin. So this is another story of one of the Buddha's past lives when he was known as King Chandraprabha. And so in this lifetime, he was famous and well known for giving away or practicing generosity. And due to that, there was one Brahmin in the kingdom who became very jealous of the king, the popularity of the king. And so this Brahmin was very jealous. And so he thought of getting rid of the king. And in order to do so, he thought about asking for the head of the king, because the king was known to give anything to people, whatever they asked for. So he thought, if I ask for the head of the king won't be able to refuse it, and he will give it to me. So if I ask the king for his head and he doesn't give it to me, then it will be embarrassing for him. It will hurt his popularity. Yeah, it would hurt his reputation. And if he does give it to me, then my purpose is served, because then the king is no more. He will die by giving away his head. So either way, it works for me. So he thought about that and he went to request for the king's head.
另外一个佛陀在因地的故事的时候，就是国王金光的一个故事。这个国王也是因为他的布施非常的有名。有一次有一个婆罗门非常的嫉妒国王有多有名，就想要把这个国王给赶走。他想了个方法，就是去索要这个国王的头颅，因为他知道这个国王，别人在问国王索要任何东西的时候，国王都会给。于是他就想，如果我问国王索要他的头颅的话，我如果被拒绝的话，那国王一定会非常的蒙羞，会因此而伤害他的名誉。那如果国王不拒绝我的话，把头颅布施给我的话，那我的目的也就达到了。
And when the Brahmin asked for the head of the king agreed to give away his head. And when he said that, the ministers of the king were very alarmed, and they didn't want the king to give away their head. They told him that if you give away your head, then you can no longer be able to care for your subjects. You won't be able to rule your kingdom, and so on. And so they requested the king not to give away his head, but the king had made his decision to give away, and there was no change in his plans. So the ministers created decoy, or dummies, or you could say fake heads of the king, lookalikes that were made out of jewels, such as gold and silver and so on, and offered it to the Brahmin, and asking him to just take this decoy of the king, this fake head, and to be content. But the Brahmin said, no, I want the king's own head.
当时这个婆罗门在问国王索要他的头颅的时候，国王就同意了。但是这个国王的大臣就觉得国王不能布施他的头颅，因为如果国王布施他的头颅的话，就没有人照顾他的子民，国王也就不能行他的国政。但是，国王已经做了这个决定，于是这个大臣他就想了个办法，他就做了一个假的一个头颅，是用金银珠宝而构成的，想以此来满足这个婆罗门的心。于是他把这个头给了这个婆罗门的时候，婆罗门说他还是要国王自己的头颅。
And because the king was so benevolent to his subjects, everyone really respected the king and were attached to him. And so even before the king himself offered his own head to the Brahmin, 2 of his own ministers just killed themselves earlier, because they couldn't bear to see the king give away his head to the Brahmin.
因为这个国王非常的友善，他的臣民、他的子民对国王是非常的敬仰。得知了国王要把自己头颅布施的这一件事情的时候，有两位大臣就自杀了，因为他们不忍看到国王布施他自己的头颅。
And so finally, the king hanged himself on a tree, and in that way gave away his head to the Brahmin. And so in that way, in one of the past lives of the Buddha, he also practiced the advanced level, the generosity of an advanced level Bodhisattva.
后来国王就自己把自己在树上吊死了，这样子的话就可以把头布施给这个婆罗门。这个故事也就是我们前面讲的证悟者的极大布施的一个例子。
Then we have, it says here, King Kanakavana, King Kanakavana, cutting his body in half at the waist and giving it away and so forth. So we couldn't find, there is a story regarding this King Kanakavana, which is a past life of the Buddha, but we couldn't find it. It's difficult to find in the teachings of the Buddha. So instead, we are going to mention another example, which is the story of King Srisena. So we will mention King Srisena's story instead of King Kanakavana, because that story we cannot find currently.
还有其他的一个公案，就是另外一个国王把自己的身体切成2半来布施给其他人的一个公案，但这个公案不是非常好找到，于法王子说就是另外一个国王布施自己身体的一个公案。
So in the kingdom of King Srisena, there was a Vedic teacher and his student. So Vedic, so Vedas are like the ancient Indian Hindu scriptures. So there was a scholar on the ancient Vedas, and he had a student, and he had taught all the Vedas to his student. And the student finally, after having learned everything from his teacher, wanted to repay the teacher for having taught everything to him. And when he told the teacher that he wanted to repay the teacher's kindness, the teacher said, "I want as a gift King Srisena's wife, the queen." And when he said that, the student was alarmed, and he thought that, oh, I certainly cannot, I will not be able to give you her, but I will give you anything else. But when he said that, the teacher became angry, and he threatened to curse the student if the student does not bring King Srisena's wife to the teacher.
这个公案就是指在婆罗门教当中有一个叫吠陀的一个一个种族，它的意思就是它的意思是指的是知识。那这当中有一个老师，然后和一个学生。那当时老师为了让学生去报答他老师的这个恩德，于是就跟学生说，为了要报答我的恩德，你要去索要这个国王的王妃来报答我的恩德。于是学生说这一点我做不到，而老师就变得非常的生气。
And the Vedic teacher told him that, anyways, you don't need to worry. If you ask the king, he will give her away. The king made the promise to give away anything to whatever, or to anyone who wishes for anything. The king agreed to give away everything that people wishes for. So he will certainly give away his queen. And so after the teacher told the student that, the student went to the king and requested for the king to give away his wife, and the king agreed. King Srisena agreed and gave away his wife to the student, who then gave her to the teacher. And after that, the king Srisena became very famous for being able, first of all, he had this reputation of being very generous, but after having given away even his wife, his reputation grew even more as being able to give away anything. So he became very famous. And due to that, again, Indra, the king of the gods, wanted to test him and see how great he really was.
当时这个老师说不用担心，你可以直接问国王要 去索要王妃，因为国王非常的慷慨，问什么都会答应。于是这个学生就去问了这个国王，于是这个国王就同意了这个学生把自己的王妃布施给了这个老师。后来也因为这一点，这个国王呢他的名誉就更加的增上，于是第10天也想去测试这个国王的慷慨的布施的心。
And so after that, Indra again took on a disguise. And in this case, he disguised himself as a person with just half a body, not a full body, but just half the body. So maybe you could say he disguised himself as a person with a head, shoulders, arms up until the waist, but no legs. And so Indra first emanated 4 people, 4 carriers, and then he emanated himself as the person that had just half a body. So these 4 carriers were carrying up the emanation of Indra, and they brought the body to King Srisena. And then after the Lord Indra's emanation arrived in front of King Srisena, Indra, in the form of that person with just half a body, told the king that the other half of my body was eaten by a tiger. And the gods in the sky told me that if somebody is able to give half of their body to me, then I will survive and I will live long. And I've asked many people to give half of their body, the other half of their body to me, but no one has agreed to give it so far. And now you're my only hope. So will you be willing to give away half of your body to me? And to that, the king, Srisena, agreed and told him that, yes, I can give my body to you.
当时第10天就转变为一个只有半个身体的一个人，也就是只有头、肩膀、腰，但是腰部以下没有腿这样的一个人。第10天还转变为4个搬运这个人的这4个人。于是这4个人把这个只有半个身体的人搬运到吉祥国王的面前之后，这个半个身体的人和吉祥国王说，他在林中被老虎吃了他自己的身体的下半部分，现在没有任何的希望，这国王是他唯一的希望，能否使国王把自己的腿布施给他，这样子的话，他才能够恢复他自己的身体。
And again, the ministers objected. They requested the king, please do not do that. But the king had made up his mind. So the king cut off half of the body with a saw. And so he cut it. And right then, right after that, the Lord Indra was truly surprised and impressed at what the king did. And so in the form, Lord Indra, in the form of that Brahmin with half a body, praised the king for his actions. And then after he praised him in that way, then Lord Indra showed his original form, his heavenly form to the king. And then Lord Indra gave the divine nectar to the king for the king to drink. And in that way, Lord Indra restored the body of the king, and the king was back to normal. And it is also said that soon after that, the queen whom the king had given away to that Vedic teacher also later offered the queen back to the king in return.
当时有许多的大臣劝国王不要布施自己的身体，但是国王说他自己已经决定，他已经做了这个决定，于是就拿刀就毫不犹豫的就把自己的半身切了下来，布施给这个婆罗门。当时因为国王的决定，因为国王的所作所为，其实第10天感到非常的惊讶，于是第10天也就赞扬国王，以及展现了自己的原貌，给了国王喝非常殊胜的蜜汁，使国王的恢复了自己的身体。后来也将王妃还给了这个国王。
So we can go to the next slide.
然后我们可以看下一页。
Hence, as previously, can we go back to the previous slide? Let's see. So anyways, in that way, one needs to think about these stories, think about these examples, and also teach of these stories to others as well.
那我们现在在听了之前的这些公案的时候，我们就要经常回忆这些公案，以及要把这些公案给他人所宣讲。
So we can go to the next slide now.
然后我们可以看下一页。
So now we are going to talk about correctly accomplishing generosity. So here we are going to speak, Sapin is going to show us how to practice generosity in a perfect way without any faults.
那我们接下来就是要讲成立无颠倒的布施。那这里参加班智达接下来就是要给我们展示如何修圆满无漏的布施。
Has two parts: achieving the 4 excellent qualities and eliminating the 7 attachments. So in order for the generosity, we're not just talking about any generosity, but the Mahayana generosity, the generosity which is practiced by a Bodhisattva. So for this generosity to be perfect without any faults, we need to practice the 4 excellent qualities, make sure we have the 4 excellent qualities, and make sure that we don't have 7 attachments. So the 4 things we need to do and 7 things we need to avoid for the generosity, practice generosity to be perfect without any faults and to be of good quality.
那我们要行大乘菩萨的布施的话，我们就是要行圆满无过患的这样的布施的话，我们就是要修4种功德，就是要做4种功德，并避免以及舍弃7种贪心。
Achieving the 4 excellent qualities is mentioned in the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras. Generosity is the annulment of its antithesis, the possession of non-discursive gnosis, the fulfilling of all the desires of others, and the maturing of sentient beings in 3 ways. So these are the 4, and it's mentioned 4 excellent qualities which we need to have in order to make the practice of generosity of a good quality. Because we may practice generosity, but it may not end up, the generosity may not end up as a very good quality. So we need to make sure that that practice of the generosity is a good quality, excellent quality. So if we have these 4, it becomes excellent. And it is mentioned, these 4 are mentioned in the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras.
这里在大乘经庄严论当中就说了这4种功德，就是远离不生之一品，具足无别之智慧，圆满众生之心愿，3成就诸众生。这就是讲的这个我们作为大乘菩萨要行持就质量非常好的布施的话，要所修持的4种功德。那我们平时的话是会修持布施，但可能不是高质量的布施。那我们要修持圆满无过患的布施的话，就要修这4种功德。
So we can go to the next slide.
我们可以看下一页。
So here it is going to speak of what the 4 are. The verse was the one we just mentioned earlier. So this is the explanation of the verse. So as it says here, hence, as previously explained, these 4 qualities are freeing yourself of stinginess. So the first of the 4 qualities is freeing yourself from stinginess. We have to make sure that we are not stingy when we give. When we practice generosity, we should not be stingy. If we are stingy and we give, there is a good karma from the act of giving, but it does not become a perfect act of giving. And so therefore, in order for it to become a perfect act of giving, for the quality of the practice to be excellent, we first need to get rid of stinginess. There should be no stinginess when we give.
首先，我们第一个就是要舍弃吝啬心，就是我们布施的时候不能有任何的吝啬。如果布施的时候有任何的吝啬的话，确实是有布施的这个善根，但是这个布施不会圆满。那我们如果要圆满一个布施的话，就要在布施的时候要舍弃吝啬的心。
And what this kind of really means is that when we give, we should, generally, if we give anything, that's great. But the thing that the thing that the bodhisattvas should give to others, the object should be something that, it shouldn't be something that you don't really care and you're just giving it away, but it should be something that you are attached to, something that means something to you, something that you are attached to. Those are the type of things that you should learn to give away.
那么具体来讲的话，我们在布施的时候，广义上来说，布施是很好的。但是菩萨在行持布施的时候，我们所布施的这个物品，不应该是我们一个不在乎的东西，应该是一些我们有所执着，或者对我们来说有意义的东西，而去把它布施。
So when you give, it should be something that you are usually attached to, not just something that doesn't mean anything to you, but something that you are attached to, that you like very much, and you usually don't want to give away. So that kind of thing you should give away and try to give it away without being stingy. So that is the first thing that you should do. And this has to be done in any kind of generosity that the Bodhisattva practices.
通常我们布施的东西的话，都不是我们非常去执着的东西，而是对我们来说没有什么意义的东西。那我们要布施的就是我们喜欢的、我们平时执着的一些东西。那这就是我们要去尝试行持的布施，而且是我们在行持任何的一种菩萨道的布施的时候，都要去尝试布施我们自己喜欢的东西。
And then the second is realizing the non-discursive, the absence of a substantial self in either a person or in phenomena. So what this means is that when we give, we should understand the emptiness of the giver, the person that is giving, the object itself, and the person that is receiving the gift. So these three, we should understand it to be of the nature of emptiness. When we speak of emptiness, there's two types of emptiness. The absence of a substantial self, or anyways, you could say the emptiness of a self, and the emptiness of phenomena. So, for example, the emptiness of oneself, one's body or oneself is the emptiness of a self, and then the emptiness of the hills, the device, the book, the bed, the house, those are the emptiness of phenomena. So all things are included in these two. Everything is emptiness in those two. The emptiness of the person and the emptiness of everything else, which is phenomena other than a person. So anyways, when we give, we should understand that the person who is giving, the person that's receiving, and the object, which is like the phenomena, everything is emptiness. If you don't understand this, when you give our practice generosity and you don't understand it to be emptiness, then the generosity will only lead or become a cause for you to be reborn in samsara, not outside of samsara. But if you understand everything to be emptiness and give at the same time, then it becomes a cause for you to be freed from samsara.
那我们第二个要行持，就是我们要实修的4种功德的话，就是没有分别心、了悟人悟我和法悟我这样的功德。那我们就是要理解，就是在布施的时候要非常的理解三轮体空，也就是我们作为布施者，我们布施的物品以及受施者，这三者都是空性的本质都是空性的。那这里的空性有指2种，一个是人无我和法无我。第一个人无我的话，就是指了解我作为一个布施者，我自己是空性的。第二个的话就是法无我，就是人以外的一切现象，不管是我们布施的，比如说一个器材或者是一本书、床等等，就是我们这些所有布施的物品也都是空性的。这样子的话，就是要充分的理解我们作为布施者。布施的物品以及受施者的话，这三者都是空性的。如果没有在这个理解的基础上去布施的话，只会使我们转生到轮回的因。但如果在有这个理解的基础上的话，所行持的布施都是使我们能够脱离轮回的因。
And then the third is fulfilling all the wishes of others by granting whatever others desire that accords with the Dharma. So what that means is that when we give to others, we should fulfill the wishes of others as well. we shouldn't give in a way that we do not fulfill others' wishes, but by giving, we should make sure that through that act, we fulfill all the wishes of other sentient beings.
第三个就是布施的时候同时要圆满一切众生的心愿，也就是说我们在布施的同时的话，也同时要确保我们能够满足众生的心愿。
And then the fourth is maturing sentient beings in 3 ways, which is attracting others to generosity and establishing them according to the capacities in one of the 3 vehicles, Shravaka, Pradeka Buddha, or the Mahayana. So what this means is that after having given to others, we by giving to others, we make others happy. We fulfill their wishes, we make them happy. And in that way, we bring them into the circle of the Dharma. We bring them or introduce them to the Buddha Dharma. And then after having introduced to them and having taught the Dharma to them, then we have to make sure deliver them to whatever state they wish to attain. So all sentient beings are different. Some Buddhists will wish to attain the Shravaka state, the result of the Shravaka. Some will wish to attain the result of the Pradeka Buddha. And then some will wish to attain the state of a full enlightenment, of a fully complete enlightened Buddha. So whatever they wish, for example, for the type of practitioner that wishes to attain the Shravaka state, then one should teach a Dharma which will lead them to attain the Shravaka state. If one's disciple or student wishes to attain the Pradeka Buddha, one should teach a Dharma that will lead them to that state. And if they wish to attain full enlightenment, one should teach a Dharma that will lead them to full enlightenment.
第4种就是我们布施的之后的话，因为我们通过布施使受施者感到心生欢喜，那通过这一点欢喜心的话，也能够使他们趋入佛法。在趋入佛法之后的话，我们就要教他们不同的法，根据他们不同的意愿，确保帮助他们证得自己希望的不同的果位。比如说有些人希望获得声闻的果位，那这样子的话，我们在他们趋入佛法之后，就要给他们教声闻乘的佛法。有些人希望获得圆觉的果位，那我们就要教他们获得圆觉果位的佛法。有一些想要获得彻证的菩萨道的果位的话，那我们就要教他们大乘的佛法。
And in this way, if we have all of these 4, when we practice generosity, the practice becomes, the quality of the practice is excellent, becomes excellent.
那这样子的话，以上这4种都具备的话，那我们这个布施的话，就能够成为一个圆满的布施。
And we can go to the next slide now.
然后我们可以看下一页。
Eliminating the 7 attachments is also taught. It is taught in that same textbook, The Ornament of the Sutras. The generosity of a bodhisattva should be unattached, not attached, without attachment, not attached at all, unattached, not attached, and without attachment. So there are these 7 things, there are 7 things basically that we should not be attached to while we practice generosity.
接下来我们就是要说的，就是第2部分，就是舍弃7种贪心。那也是在大直经庄严论当中要所说的，就是舍弃7种贪心，也就是菩萨所修之布施，莫贪、不贪、无有贪，还有诸如亦非贪、莫贪、不贪、无有贪。
And so it says here the bodhisattva should be unattached. So what that means is that when the bodhisattva gives, they should not be attached to the object that they are giving.
首先，这里第一个讲的莫贪，就是在菩萨在行持布施的时候，他们不应该对他们布施的物品而感到而升起执着，升起执着的心。
Of course, we mentioned earlier that when we give, we should give something that is we usually are attached to, not something that doesn't mean anything to us. But here we're saying that when we give, the thing that you're giving is something that you're usually attached to, but while you're actually giving it, you shouldn't feel attached to it. But it's usually in your daily life, it's something that you're usually attached to, but in the actual act of giving, you're not attached, and you shouldn't be attached.
当然，我们之前说过，布施的时候要布施我们所执着的东西，但是我们真正在行布施行的这一刻的时候，我们不能去执着我们要布施的东西。也就是说，我们要布施的物品是我们在日常当中我们所执着的东西，但真正在布施的那一刻的话，却不能对这个物品产生执着的心。
The second here, not attached, that means when one gives, one should not be attached to procrastination, which is that, for example, when a beggar comes, you say, you think, oh, I won't give today, but I'll give tomorrow. I'll practice tomorrow. I'll practice later. Just put it off. You should be not attached to procrastination when giving.
第二个就是不谈，就是我们不能够有懈怠的心。就是比如说有一个乞讨者到我们面前的话，我们不应该说啊，我明天再布施或者后天再布施，一直这样的拖延。
The third is without attachment. That means that when we give, we should not be attached to the thought that, oh, I just gave now. This is good enough. I can leave it here, and I don't need to practice anymore. What I did is good enough. So you shouldn't be content with what you have given, but instead you should think that I need to give more. So if you get content with what you've given, thinking that's enough, I did good, so that's enough. So then that's not right. You shouldn't be attached to that thought that that's enough.
第三个就是无有贪，就是我们刚刚就是我们刚刚布施了之后的话，就心里想啊，我刚才已经布施了，那非常好了，以后就不用再修了。如果有了这样子的话，那我们就产生一种自满心，那我们就不应该就是对刚才行持的布施有一种自满心，而是要想就是嗯。而是想这是应该要做的，而且要继续行持这样的布施，不能够因为刚才所行持的布施就觉得这样已经足够了，不需要再修行，不需要再修持布施了。
The fourth is not attached at all. So that means that when we give, we shouldn't think or we shouldn't be attached to the thought that by giving this, may I be repaid in this lifetime. And may I be repaid for my good deeds by others in this very lifetime. May the result come to me back in this lifetime. So if you're attached to that thought, then that's not right. You should not be attached to that thought.
第四个就是指非贪，就是我们执着于一种我现在布施的这个功德，希望我能够今生得到果报，或者是在今生得到一些好处这样的想法。
Unattached is similar. If you're attached to the thought while giving, if you're attached to the thought that by giving today, in my future lifetimes, may I be repaid, then that is not right. That thought is not right. So you should not be attached to that kind of thought. You should make sure that there's none of that kind of thoughts in your mind while giving.
第五个就是莫贪，就是我们在布施的时候想，我现在这个布施的这个果报，我来世的时候能够得到一些好处，得到一些果报，那我们就不能有这样子的想法，在布施的时候就是不能产生这样的心。
Not attached is the sixth one. That means that when we give, we shouldn't be attached to the thought of stinginess, of not wanting to abandon stinginess. So when we give, sometimes we have this thought of we don't want to get rid of stinginess. We don't see it as a fault, and we just leave it and don't do anything about it. Don't do anything about getting rid of it. So that's not right. This thought of stinginess is fine. I can keep this thought. I don't need to get rid of it. Anyways, just being comfortable with having stinginess is not right. So you should not be attached to not getting rid of stinginess. You should rather want or hope to get rid of stinginess.
第六个就是指不谈，就是我们不应该想，就心里有想不放弃我们的吝啬心的这样的一个想法，也就是说，我们心里不觉得吝啬心是不好的这样的想法要断除，也就是说，我们不能非常的习惯于自己有吝啬心，不觉得这是一个问题，相反的，我们应该要尽力的去摆脱我们的吝啬心。
So it means one should not be attached to the thought of not wanting to get rid of stinginess.
所以就是说，我们不应该执着于，或者是我们不应该，不放弃于不想要摆脱我们吝啬心的这样的一个想法。
And then the seventh one is without attachment. So this means to not be attached to distractions. And for that, there are two types of, it can further be divided into two. The seventh attachment can be divided into two further attachments. One which is attachment to the result of the Hinayana, and one which is the attachment to the three spheres, which is the giver, the object, and the recipient. So in other words, when one should not be attached to looking forward to attaining the Hinayana result, because that's not something one should look forward to, first of all. So one should not look forward or not like the Hinayana result. Also, the second is one should not be attached to it, there being, one should not be attached to the thought of there being a true existence in the giver, the recipient, and the object.
第7个就是无有贪，就是我们的妄念作意。第一个就是我们的就是第一个的话就是作意的放逸，就是指贪恋小乘。这个的话本来就是我们不应该所要去期望的，就是本来我们就不应该期望能够获得小乘的果位。第二个的话就是我们去贪恋三轮，就是贪恋人物以及就是我们布施的人以及我们布施的物品以及受施者，就是我们不应该贪恋有三轮想。
And we can go to the next slide.
然后我们可以看下一页。
So earlier in that verse, we were talking about, Sapin was saying, do not be attached to this, do not be attached to that. So it's don't be attached to this and that. Now we are, it's the same, pretty much the same thing. We're just actually recognizing, Sapin is directly showing you what is the actual attachment that we should be avoiding.
那我们之前就三家班指来说了，我们不能执着这个，不能执着那个，等等等等。那这里的话，也就是是一样的，就但是是直接的阐述我们要避免贪恋的东西是什么。
So it's pretty much the same thing. We can go through this quickly. It says here, thus this entails eliminating the attachments to wealth. The first is wealth. So wealth, being attached to wealth, that is the fault. So we should not have that fault. Second is to procrastination. When we give, we should not have the attachment to procrastination, which is, I don't want to practice today, I can practice later, tomorrow later, and so on. If you put it off, then that's procrastination, and that becomes a very big obstacle to practicing generosity.
第一个就是指财物的贪恋，就是这本身这个对财物贪恋就是一个过患。第二个的话就是对懈怠的贪婪，就是我今天不想修明天再修，或者是后天再修。有这样子的贪婪的有这样子的懈怠的心的话，是对我们的布施的一个非常大的一个障碍。
And then the third is feeling satisfied after only achieving a little. So you just, if you give a little, you become satisfied by just that and think, oh, that's good enough. I can stop right here and leave it here for now. So if you think that, that's also a fault. We should not be attached to that kind of thinking. Then the fourth is the hope of getting something in return, which is if I give something right now, by giving this gift to others, may I be repaid in this very lifetime. If you're attached to that thought, that's a fault. And then the future result or deed in the later life. So it's similar to that. It's just in regard to the future. So by giving right now, if you think by giving this gift to others, may I be repaid in my future lifetimes. May I experience happy results in future lifetimes. I'll be repaid in the future lifetimes. Then that's also a fault in one's thinking.
第三个就是我们就觉得现在已经布施了之后就已经很好了，就不用再修了，我们不应该有这样子的想法，不应该以现在的布施产生一种满足的心。第四个就是贪图回报，不管是就是靠这个布施的这个功德，贪图今生的果报，或者是希望能够以这个布施的功德在来世得到果报。这样子的话，就是这两者贪图任何的回报的这样的想法，也是我们应该要断除的。
The antithesis of generosity, such as not wishing to rid oneself of stinginess and the like. So that is the sixth one, the sixth fault. Basically means to be lazy to get rid of stinginess, the thought of stinginess. So the enemy of generosity, or the opposite of generosity, is stinginess. So when we practice generosity and stinginess cannot go together. So either you practice a good generosity, or you have stinginess. If you have stinginess, when you're giving, if you have stinginess, generosity, it will be generosity, but it won't be a perfect generosity. In other words, the generosity will be with faults. So therefore, one shouldn't be attached to the thought of not wanting to get rid of the stinginess. Instead, one should get rid of the stinginess.
第六个就是不想摆脱吝啬心的这样的想法，吝啬心是布施的敌人，所以我们就是如果有了吝啬心而行持的布施的话，这个布施就不是一个圆满的布施，所以我们就不应该有不想摆脱吝啬心的这样的一个想法。
In other words, what it's saying is that when we practice generosity, we shouldn't make ourselves comfortable with stinginess, but rather we should do something about it. In this case, is to get rid of stinginess.
也就是说，我们在修布施的时候，不应该就是非常习惯于，或者是说非常对自己的吝啬心感到非常的舒适，而不去摆脱自己的吝啬心。相反的，我们应该要尝试去摆脱我们的吝啬心。
And then the seventh is distractions. So we can go to the next slide first.
第7个就是放逸，我们可以看下一页当中所讲的。
The last includes 2 types of distractions. So the 7th attachment has 2 types. It can be further divided into 2 distractions. The distraction of attention. So the first is the distraction of attention. And what that means is to, as it says here, which is to take pleasure in the Hinayana. So the distraction of attention is to look forward or like the result of the Hinayana, which is, for example, the Arahata, the Pratyeka Buddha. If you like those results, if you are attracted to those results instead of attracted to the result of full enlightenment, then that is a fault. So these two, you should not be attracted to the results of the Hinayana, because that is not what one needs to attain as a Bodhisattva or Mahayana practitioner.
这个第7个当中的放逸当中又分2个，一个就是作意的放逸，也就是我们期待或者是非常喜欢小乘的果位，也就是声闻或者缘觉的果位，被这2个果位所吸引，而不是希求获得彻证的果位。那我们就是不应该有这样的放逸的作意，就是不应该有期待获得小乘果位的这样的想法。
And then the second, as it says here, and the distraction of conceptual thinking, which is to be conceptually attached to the 3 spheres in the act of giving. That is the giver, recipient, and the thing given. So the second type of attachment is a type of distraction as well. And that is to be attached to the 3 spheres, which is to think that I, the giver of the object, exist, or or the object that I'm giving exists, or the person that I'm giving to exists. If you're attached to the existence of these, then that is also a fault, and it is a distraction, and it makes the generosity not perfect.
这第7个要舍弃的贪心当中的第2个部分，就是我们要舍弃对3轮想的这个贪心，也就是说，这也是一种放逸，就是如果说我们有对于我自己作为一个布施者，布施的物品以及受施者都存在的这样一个想法，或者是说我作为布施人，这个布施的物品存在的想法，或者是受施的人存在这样的想法，有这样的想法都是过患，都不是圆满的布施。
I might summarize the above with this concluding verse. So the above mentioned is going to be summarized here in the form of a verse by Sakya himself. He wrote, attachment to wealth, which is the first, postponement, which is the second, and satisfaction, that is the third, to hopes of something in return, which is the fourth, and to future results, the fifth, to the opposed factors, the sixth, and to the distractions, which is the seventh. These a wise person should be rid of. So this is the concluding verse that which Sakya wrote.
那这以上所讲的这7种贪心的话，在家班指导用简略的诗句都可以来描述，也就是第一个财务，第二个 懈惰，第3个少行足，第4个今生回报，第5个艺术，第6个艺品，第7个放逸之期贪然后这些都是智者应舍弃的。
So these concluding verses, or these verses, come in handy a lot. Sometimes a lot of talk earlier, like there was a lot of talk, and it may seem difficult to remember at times. But if you are able to memorize the verse, and then it's easier to remember all of the 4 good qualities and the 7 attachments and the like. So if one remembers the verse, memorizes the verse, remembers it while giving, then one can make sure that one's practice of generosity is perfect.
这些诗句非常的有用。我们之前讲了许许多多的东西，很多东西比较难记住。这样的诗句的话，就能够帮助我们来记住我们之前所讲的。布施的时候，也可以经常来想这一些，就可以知道我们怎么样做呢，才能够形成一个圆满的布施。
So anyways, these 4 great qualities and the 7 abandoning the 7 attachments is necessary for the bodhisattvas to practice while giving, while practicing generosity. And with these, the practice becomes very pure, of good quality, and perfect, without faults. And in that way, it can surely become, without any doubt, a cause for attaining enlightenment.
那这前面讲的这个要所行持的4种功德，以及我们要所舍弃的7种贪心的话，如果我们这样子去做的话，那我们就能够使我们的布施一定是清净的，质量非常的好，也没有任何的过患，同时也能够成为我们证悟的因的这样的布施。
So we can go to the next slide.
然后可以看下一页。
So this is the last topic. I plan to complete this chapter today, the chapter on the generosity. So we'll go to this, and if it gets too late, then we can skip the question and answer session so we can look at the time.
接下来就是最后一部分，就是这个布施的功德。房子说他今天想把这一部分的大量内容全部都讲完，如果之后太晚的话，我们就可以跳过我们到之后问答的环节。
So the benefits of generosity. So what we're talking about here is if we give generosity, which is the cause, what are the results? What good things will come from it, from the cause? So Sapna is going to mention about the good things or the good results that come from practicing generosity.
之前我们都是讲了行持的布施，那这些行持的布施有何功德？那萨迦班智达在这里就具体讲了所行持布施能获得的功德。
The benefits of generosity of 2 types, those that are temporary and those that are ultimate. So when we speak of the benefits of the generosity, there are 2 types. The first is temporary and the second is ultimate. Temporary benefits means the benefits that comes to oneself before one attains enlightenment. Ultimate benefits means the benefits that comes or that we receive after we attain or when we attain enlightenment.
这里布施的功德又细分为2，一个是暂时的功德，一个是究竟的功德。暂时的功德就是我们在证悟之前所获得的功德，究竟的功德也就是我们在证悟的时候获得的功德。
The temporary benefits are felt both in this life and in later lives. So that means that the benefits that we receive by giving, the benefits that occur before we attain enlightenment from the act of giving, can also be further divided into 2 types. The benefits are the temporary benefits that we receive in this very lifetime, and also the benefits that we receive in our future lifetimes.
这里暂时的功德也分为2种，就是一个此生的功德，也就是第2个是来生的功德。也就是说，我们暂时的功德，就是在我们在证悟之前所获得的功德的话，有些是今生所感，有些是来生所感。
In this life, by making sentient beings happy by your generosity, you will attain wealth, a good name, fame, glorious attainments, and happiness in full measure. So that what that means is that by giving in this very lifetime, there will also be not just results in one's future lifetimes, but there will also be results in this very lifetime. And the results that one can attain in this very lifetime is that by giving, one will attain a lot of wealth in return, which is one of the results of giving. One will also get a good name, and fame basically means that one will become renowned for one's actions. One will have a good reputation. One will earn a good reputation from giving. There will also be glorious attainments, which means that other kinds of great things, whatever, auspicious circumstances for oneself, anything that's good will happen. And also happiness in full measure, which is that one's body physical health will be good, and one's physical health, one's body will be in good shape, and also one's mind will be happy.
通过布施的话，就不仅仅我们来世能够获得果报，今生也能够获得果报。通过布施的话，我们能够获得许许多多的钱财，我们也能够获得名誉，就是获得很好的名声，同时也能够获得荣誉，就是比如说荣誉等等，或者是其他一些吉祥之事。同时的话，我们也能够获得圆满的安乐，就是说我们的身体能够健康，心里能感到快乐。
So we can go to the next slide.
然后可以看下一页。
As the guide to the Bodhisattva way of life teaches, which was taught by Chandraga, why do I not see that regardless of the future attainment of Buddhahood, in this very life, gaining glorious wealth, fame, and happiness come from pleasing sentient beings? So what it is saying is that the meaning of this verse is that when one gives to others, one pleases others, one makes others happy because one fulfills their wishes. We give them something that they don't have, so they'll naturally become happy. And due to that, good karma from that, there's no doubt that one will attain, due to that good act, of course, it is saying, of course, one will attain Buddhahood in the future. But not just that, not just one will attain Buddhahood, but even in this very lifetime, one will enjoy glorious wealth. One will be endowed with glorious wealth, fame, and happiness, just to the act of pleasing sentient beings, to giving.
布施的时候，我们因为能够因为布施满足他人，使他人因为获得自己之前没有的东西的时候而感到快乐。因为这个布施的善行的话，一定会使我们成佛，而且不仅仅是这一点，在今生的时候，我们也能够获得受用、荣誉、名望、吉祥、圆满的安乐等等。
So I'm saying, of course, one will attain Buddhahood in the future through giving. No need to say that. But even in this lifetime alone, there's great results, such as those that is glorious wealth, fame, happiness, that one will attain. So when it says, why do I not see that? It means that you should understand that this is certain.
这个就是入菩萨行者当中的这个颂词当中，就是说因为这个布施的这个功德，未来一定会成佛，今生也能够吉祥。就是之前所讲的，我们在今生当中也能够获得受用、荣誉等等的一切好处。岂不见明乐的意思就是说，我们非常的确定，通过布施的话，一定能够获得这样子好的果报。
And then there's another quote, as it says here, and as the ornament of Mahayana Sutras teaches, even though a donor does not desire wealth, he will meet with exceedingly bountiful and excellent wealth. So this isn't actually a quote of the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, but the Indian master Vashubandhu wrote a commentary on the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, and in that commentary it says this verse, so you could say. So what this means, this quote means, is that even if while one gives to others, one does not desire wealth in return, even if one doesn't have that desire or wish to receive wealth in return. Because one gave to others due to that good karma, one will naturally receive the result of bountiful and excellent wealth, and one will be able to enjoy that, even if one does not wish for it. It's natural for it to come to oneself.
这里当中，这里虽然在《摩尼密写文章当中说的是经庄言论当中另外一个颂词，但是罗切说这个不是经庄言论当中的原文，而是一个印度论师所加的一句话，那就是说施者虽不贪，却得多善用。就是说虽然布施的时候没有去想要去获得，想要去因为这个布施而获得一些果报，但是因为这个布施的这个善根，自然就会得到许多的善用。
So it's saying that even if one does not wish, one will receive wealth in return, just because of the law of karma. That's how the law of karma is. If there's a cause, there'll be a result. If there's a good cause, there'll be a good result. So that's the good result. The result here is that one will receive exceedingly bountiful, which means for the result, it's not like one will receive just one or two objects back in return, but one will receive a great many wealth, exceedingly bountiful, which means many wealth, lots of wealth. It's not just few. And the wealth that one receives, the many wealth that one receives, it's not like it is of poor quality, but it is excellent wealth, which means it is of the highest and best quality, the wealth which one will receive. So these are the results that one will attain in this very lifetime by giving.
虽然布施的时候没有去想要贪图什么，但是自然会得到许多的善用，这就是因为因果不虚的原因。就而且的话，这个获得的果报是多善用，就是不是一个两个的善报，而是许许多多的钱财。而且的话，这个果报，这个获得的钱财也不是非常就是质量差的一些果报，而是在今天能够获得质量非常高的就是钱财等的果报。而且这一些所有的果报都是指今生所获得的果报。
So we can go to the next slide now.
那我们看下一页。
The benefits of generosity to be realized in all future lives include such inestimable benefits as attaining whatever you desire. This being the type of result in which what you experience agrees with the causing deed. So what this means is that earlier we talked about the result in this lifetime, which is if you give in this lifetime, what you'll receive back in this very lifetime. Now we're speaking about if you give in this lifetime, what will one receive in one's future lifetimes? And this is all before one attains enlightenment still. So both of them. So still before we attain enlightenment, we're talking about the results that we receive before we attain enlightenment. So this is in the future lifetimes, while we're still in samsara, what are the good results that one will receive? And for this, there are two types of results that we should know of. The first of the two is the result which what you experience agrees with the causing deed, which means the result which is similar to the cause.
那我们之前讲的是今生所得到的果报是哪一些？那现在讲的就是说我们在来世的时候会得到怎么样的果报？这一切都是讲还处在轮回当中，就是还处在证悟之前所有的身世当中，我们来世能够通过我们的布施能够获得怎么样的果报？那第一个果报就是能够获得同心等流果，那同心等流果就是指与因相似的果报。
So sorry, I explained the last part a little incorrectly. Both of these two types of results are similar to the cause, but they're a little bit different. The first is, as it says here, result in which what you experience agrees with the cause indeed, which means result which is similar to the cause in regard to the experience. The second is result which is similar to the cause in regard to or in respect to action, or you could say the habit.
拉子说前面这个最后一部分有点解释的不太对，就是我们讲的是获得两种不同的果报，这两种不同的果报都是与它的因相似。那这两种的话，就是它有不同的区别， 第一个的话就是，因为它的果和它的因相似，是指它在这个过程当中，或者是它在这个布施的这个或者是它这个布施的这个经验当中的这个相似。第二个是指这个布施的这个行本身，这个布施的这个行动本身，它的这个获得的果报和它的这个因相似。
So in order to understand the first, which is result similar to the cause in respect to experience, we can think of this, for example, if there's a killer, a murderer, for example, when a murderer kills somebody, they give that other person and who is dying an experience. The experience that the other person is going to experience is, or go through, is the experience of a shortening of life. When the killer kills the other person will experience a shortage of their lifespan or a cutting of their life. That is the experience that they will receive. And that is the cause which the murderer has accumulated through the killing. The other person has experienced their death or short life. Likewise, due to that cause or that action, in their future lifetime, the murderer in their future life will experience a similar result to what the other person that they had killed in their previous lifetime had experienced, which is a shortage of life, a shortening of life, as if their life was being cut off. So if you kill in this lifetime, the experience you give the other person is a shortage of life. With that as the cause, the result will be similar to that cause, which is one's future lifetime, oneself will experience a short life. And so the experience is similar. The result is similar to the cause in regard to the experience.
第一个就是果报和因相似，从这个所感受的经历的这个角度的来说的话，就是我们举一个例子来说，我们可以设想一个杀人犯，这个杀人犯他杀了一个人，那在这个过程当中，这个杀人犯他给这个被杀的人所带来的一个经历的话，就是一个短命的一个经历，因为这个杀人犯他的杀生的这个行为，使这个人的寿命缩短，那他就造了一个。那这个杀人犯他就造了一个短命的因，由此因这个杀人犯他来世也会受和他自己所造的这个给他人带来的这个经历所相似的因，也就是所相似的果报，也就是短命的果报。那也就是说，他今生因为杀生，他给他人带来的经历是短命的一个这样的经历。那由此的因，他来世会受与这个因相似的果报。那也就是说，他来世的话也会受短命的果报。那这一点就是从来世所感的果报与因相似，这个是从所行的经历的角度而言的。
So that is just an example, but the idea is the same. When one gives to others in this lifetime, the experience that the other person will go through or experience is happiness by receiving, because they receive the gifts, they will become happy. And by giving to others, they attain something that they didn't have earlier, which is a wealth. So due to that action is the cause in one's future lifetimes, the result is that oneself will receive wealth from others, and one will become wealthy and will experience happiness of attaining wealth, just as one made the other person happy of attaining wealth in one's previous lifetime. So the experience, this is we're talking about the future life, the benefits which will come in one's future lifetimes in regard to the experience.
同样的，相似的，我们之前讲的这个例子一样的这个思维的话，那我们如果布施的话，我们在布施的时候，让他人因为获得了之前他们所没有的钱财，而感到非常的欢喜。那同样的话，我们来世也能够获得同样的 果报。那来世的话，我们也会从他人那里获得钱财，也会使我们变得有钱，从此我们也会因此而感到欢喜。那这一点都是因为我们之前所造了，使我们现在所感到这样的果报的因，就是我们之前给他人布施钱财，他人获得了之前自己没有的东西，就是钱财，因此感到欢喜。这样子的话，我们来世就会获得相似的果报。
So in short, by making others happy in this lifetime through giving, in one's future lifetime, one will also become happy and receive lots of wealth, similar to the cause. The second is that by practicing being daring enough to give to others, in other words, by giving a lot of wealth to others in this lifetime, in one's future lifetimes, the result is that one will continue to be able to give to others because there's like this pattern or habit that's already been established. So in this lifetime, if we get used to giving to others in one's future lifetime, it will be easy to continue or to pick up where we left off and continue to give to others. So that is the second type of benefit from giving that one will receive in one's future lifetimes.
那简而言之的话，我们今生让他人感到欢喜，通过我们的布施让他人感到欢喜的话，那同样我们也会在来世的话，也会感到欢喜，也就是会获得与因相似的果报。那同时的话，我们今生敢于非常慷慨的去布施给他人的话，那么呢来世的果报的话，也就是说我们也会非常的。就是因为在建立了这样的一个习惯之上的话，会非常容易去布施，觉得布施是非常习以为常的，也非常容易就来世轻易的去布施给他人。那这样子的话，这就是我们在从暂时的功德当中所讲的来生的功德。
This being the type of actions mentioned earlier, both of these are results which are similar to the deed, the actual cause. And so the result of these, the other results that one can attain in future lifetimes is, as it says here, and never being born in lands with barren and rough landscapes. So by giving in this lifetime, other results, good results that one will receive in one's future lifetimes is that one will not be reborn in places with rough landscapes or bad lands, but rather one will be reborn in a good place where there's good landscapes, good views, and so on. And will not be reborn in times of famine. So that means that one will not be reborn in a time when there's shortage of food and drinks, because it is said that in the future there are times yet to come which there will be famine, which are times when there will be shortage of food and drink, and many people will die because of the lack of food and drink. And there will also be times, degenerate times in the future when people die because of sicknesses, such as now. For example, that's something similar due to the virus and the like. And then there are times in the future when one will not, the times in the future when many people will die due to wars, due to fighting and the like. So anyways, by giving in this lifetime, as a result, in one's future lifetimes, one will not be born in any place or time where there's famine. One will not be reborn in a time or place where there's sicknesses, viruses, diseases spreading. One will not be reborn in a time when people die due to wars and so on. And one will instead be reborn in the opposite of these.
这个两者都是与因所相似的果报。那另外一个我们来世获得的果报，就是我们不会转生于贫瘠之处，就是我们不会转生于就土地非常贫瘠，周围什么都没有的这样的一个地方，而是会转于一个土地非常富饶及漂亮的地方。同时，我们也不会转生于饥荒劫，就是缺斤少粮，或者是缺少食物，缺少饮用的东西的一个这样的一个时候。那也就是说。 因为未来的话，我们会遇到饥荒的时候，那个时候会缺水，会缺少食物。像在末法时代，比如说未来的时候，就如现在，我们现在就处于这个疫情的时候，未来的话也会因为战争会有人过世等等等等。这样子的话，我们今生的布施的话，就会使我们来世不会转生到饥荒的时候，或者转生到有疾病的时候，或者转生到人会因为真正而死亡的时候。相对而言，对立而言，我们会因为这个布施的果报，转生到就是这一些时段的一个对立的时段，也就是比如说不会转生到饥荒的时候，不会转生到疾病的时候，不会转生到有战争的时候等。
And we can go to the next slide.
然后我们看下一页。
And as the verse summary of the perfection of wisdom teaches, through generosity, the Bodhisattva cuts of going to a future life as a hungry spirit. He cuts off poverty and likewise all emotional afflictions. When he practices this generosity, he will attain infinite and vast wealth. So it says in this summary of the perfection of wisdom that by giving, the Bodhisattva will not be reborn in the future lifetime as a hungry spirit. The hungry spirits are known for experiencing great suffering of hunger and thirst. So one will not be reborn in that state. That is also one of the states in which one will not have the time to practice the Dharma. So that's a good thing if one is not reborn there. And one will not be reborn there if one gives in this lifetime. Also, if one gives in this lifetime, in one's future lifetimes, one will not experience poverty. Also, all of one's emotional afflictions, which is basically the defilements such as stinginess, attachment to wealth, and all of those wrong or bad thoughts or, emotional afflictions, they will also be gone eventually. And also one will attain infinite wealth and vast wealth, which is just basically a lot of wealth and all of its quality would be great.
那同样的，在这个摄颂当中也说，就是菩萨所布施，断除恶鬼道，一切贫乏苦烦恼亦断除。行施受多受用无量的增长。就是说，我们菩萨通过布施的话，不会转生到恶鬼道，也不会，嗯，也不会因为就是也不会使我们感到受贫穷的，也不会受贫穷的苦。同时的话，我们心中也不会有烦恼的，也不会有升起各种烦恼，如有吝啬心、对钱财有执着的心等等，这些的烦恼也都会消失，同时也会获得无量的钱财，而且也是就是非常质量高的无量的钱财。
We can go to the next slide.
那可以看下一页。
As for the ultimate benefits, when you become a Buddha, an ocean-like assembly of followers will gather from both the mundane and super-mundane spheres. So what this means is now we're talking about the ultimate benefits, which is the benefits which one will receive after attaining enlightenment. So we all know that the 6 perfections are the causes for attaining enlightenment. They're commonly the causes for attaining enlightenment, but each practice is different, as we know. Generosity is different from moral conduct is different from patience, and so on. So that means that generosity is the cause, although what it has in common with the other practices, the other perfections, is that it will grant a result in full enlightenment. There still has to be an uncommon result when attaining enlightenment. So we're talking about the special uncommon result that one will attain or receive after one attains enlightenment from giving, due to giving or practicing generosity as the cause.
接下来就是讲究竟的功德，也就是指我们在证悟之后，通过这个布施所获得的功德。那我们之前在开始讲布施度之前的话，我们说过6度的话，每一度都是能够帮助我们获得证悟的因，但是每一度当中，虽然他们都是能够帮助我们获得证悟的因，但他们具体的修行却不同。相同的是，他们都是能够帮助我们证悟的因，但是不相同的是，就是每一度的话，它都会带来不同的结果。那这里就是说，我们通过布施，在 证悟之后的话，能够获得什么样不同的功德。
So, having practiced generosity, along with the 6 perfections, the other perfections, then eventually one will attain enlightenment. When one attains enlightenment, there are many qualities that one will have attained by then. And the qualities that are directly connected, or the results that are directly connected to the giving practice of generosity are, the first is an ocean-like assembly of followers will gather from both the mundane and super-mundane spheres. So what that means is that when one attains enlightenment, because one had earlier practice in one's previous lives in the practice of generosity, now one has attained enlightenment, many sentient beings and many also not just sentient beings, but also many Aryas are noble beings, enlightened beings. Not talking about future, not talking about enlightened Buddhas, but enlightened Bodhisattvas and even Arahats and Pratyeka Buddhas and sentient beings. All of them will gather. Many countless beings such as the like will gather as one's disciples and to listen to the Dharma from oneself, now that one is a Buddha.
修布施的话，加上其他的布施度的话，加在一起能够使我们证悟。证悟了之后的话，有许多不同的功德。其中第一个功德的话，就是我们在证悟之后的话，因为我们之前所行持的布施，现在我们证悟了，这样子的话，就有许许多多的有情、圣者、证悟的菩萨、阿罗汉、圆觉的话，都会作为我们的弟子聚集在一起。
The second benefit which one will attain when one attains enlightenment is you will receive worshipful offerings arising from the virtuous fruits of both of these spheres and will attain immeasurably vast, excellent qualities. So what this means is that when one attains enlightenment, one will receive many offerings offered out of respect from others, from all of one's followers. And these offerings will be those that have risen from the virtuous deeds created by sentient beings, and also the virtuous deeds that were created by the noble Aryas. In other words, in brief, what this means is that once one attains enlightenment, the beings of the 3 realms, all the beings of the 3 realms, which is the desire, the form, and the formless realm, will make offerings to you now that you are a Buddha.
第二个究竟的功德，就是指我们证悟之后的话，就会有他人因为尊重的心给我们的提供许多的供养。那这里就是说，有情的所有善根以及圣者等等，在我们证悟之后的话，就三界一切的有情，就是三界就是指欲界、色界、无色界的众生的话，都会为我们而行持供养。
And one will attain immeasurably vast, excellent qualities such as mastery of the meditative absorption of the sky treasury. So this is one of the results as well. When one attains enlightenment, one will master the meditation on the sky treasury. So what this is that because one has this meditation, the name of the meditation is called sky treasury. And when one attains enlightenment, one will have mastered it. I think one attains this while one is a Bodhisattva, enlightened Bodhisattva, but one will master it completely when one attains enlightenment. And a benefit that arises if one has this meditation known as sky treasury is that whatever you wish for, just if you think of anything, it will appear in the sky. You can use the sky as if it is your treasury. So if you think about a food, it will appear in the sky right in front of you. Just whatever you think of, it will appear right in front of you in the sky, and you can take it from the sky easily, just like that. And then you can use it in any way you wish. So that is one of the benefits.
另外一个功德的话，就证悟之后会获得虚空藏的禅定，就是说我们在 在证悟之后的话，我们就是我们能够彻底的精通这虚空藏的禅定。也就是说在那个时候，我们不管心里愿什么，我们都可以以天空作为我们的宝藏，自己心里愿什么，就直接能够在天空当中显现出来。比如说我们心里想要获得一个食物，这样子去想的同时的话，虚空当中、天空当中就会出现这样的食物，然后我们就可以得到它，以我们任何想用的方式去用我们这些所愿的东西。
Okay, and with this, we have completed the chapter on the perfection of generosity.
好，那至此为止，我们就圆满了我们之前所讲的布施度的所有内容。
那么达拉贝拉拉乔扎罗，给做去的用所四巴来自吞波古耶日邦节，也别真做来出了拉多子，长久3年准备为个拉进。的家里些为那那把有他也现在苦给忙个拉进。图解全部搞定，给把当开把普多中为原的。你这别个了，天瓦来人别这里是往什么能瓦？考虑觉得假设这把当，那多路人头面下了的。特别开了单位，特别了，那多过年都是蛮多钱，不如给我蛮多中华的公干假设这了那把了说。All suffering without exception arises from desiring happiness for oneself, while perfect Buddhahood is born from the thought of benefiting others. Therefore, to really exchange my own happiness for the suffering of others is the practice of Bodhisattva. So what this verse means, in short, is that to try to do it and also at least try to exchange one's happiness and suffering, to give to take on the suffering of others upon oneself, and to give one's happiness in return to them, is the practice of a bodhisattva.
这个佛子行37颂的这个颂词当中的这个颂词就是诸苦由他自乐生圆满正觉利他成，是故己乐于他苦，正是相换佛子行。这个偈颂当中就简短来说，它的意思就是说，当我们尝试去做，或者是尝试去以自己的痛苦去换他人的快乐的话，是真实的佛子行。
As it says here, all of the suffering that one has, many people suffer. If you look in this world, there's so many people suffer, or many sentient beings suffer. The reason why they're suffering, of course, there are many reasons, but one of the main reasons is that they just always think about their own self. They think about themselves, which is fine, but that's the only thing they're really concerned of, which is a problem if you're only concerned about that alone. So they want to be happy, and that's all. So therefore, as it also says in the way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva, although sentient beings wish to get rid of happiness, although they do not wish to suffer, they create the causes for future suffering. Although sentient beings wish to be happy, they avoid creating the causes of happiness. So that is the problem. Sentient beings do not understand what is the causes and the results, the order. They want to be happy, but they create the causes, the actions that they do lead them to suffering. They don't want to suffer, but everything they do leads them to suffering.
所有的自己所感受到的痛苦的话，就是许多有情所感受到的所有的痛苦的话，都是他们自己总是想着他们自己，就只管他们自己，但是 就是只考虑他们自己的话，就是一个很大的问题。就好像这在祭天菩萨的入菩萨行论当中所说的，虽然众生不愿意受众苦，但是他们却一直总是受苦的因。虽然众生想要获得安乐，但他们却没有去造过获得安乐的因。也就是说，虽然所有的有情，他们都想要获得快乐，但他们却从来没有造过使他们快乐的因。虽然不想受苦，但是却一直造受苦的因。
If you think about how did the Buddhas attain enlightenment, was it just by thinking about being concerned about themselves? And the answer to that is no. They were concerned about the welfare of others. And this is the great difference between sentient beings and Buddhas, the great border. And if you want to differentiate sentient beings between Buddhas, this is how you can do it. Sentient beings think about themselves, Buddha thinks about others. And this is why there's such a big difference between them.
那佛已经成佛了，是因为佛只想着他自己吗？那完全不是这样。佛成佛了，就是因为完全不考虑自己，只考虑众生。那我们要区别有情和佛的界限的话，非常的容易。如果有情只考虑自己，佛考虑他人。
And so therefore, since bodhisattvas need to attain enlightenment, one of the causes for that is to, of course, bodhicitta, the thought of awakening. And one of the modes of practicing that is by exchanging. Many people call it donglen in Tibetan. Dong means give, len means receive. You give your happiness, you receive your suffering. In Sakya, we don't really use that term, but it's still the same. We call it dashinjewa. So it means you exchange oneself and others, which is basically exchange your happiness and suffering. It's just a different term. It's the same thing. Anyways, we need to do that as bodhisattvas. Many of you might have read Donglen, so that's why I mentioned that. It appears in the books as well. So, but it is the same thing, exchanging happiness and suffering. So the way we should do this is we can think about one of the past lives of the Buddha.
所以我们作为菩萨的话，我们要成佛的话，其中的一个因就是菩提心，就我们之前所讲过的。另外就是要有一个行，就是要有自他相换的这个行。这个自他相换的话，一般来说叫 tonlam，这个 tonlam就是给和接受，就是我们去给众生痛苦，然后去对不起，给众生快乐，然后接受众生的痛苦。那在萨迦派里面的话，也有自己的一个专用的一个名称，意思也是一样的，也是自他相换的修法。那我们具体要做的时候，就可以想佛在因地的时候的一些故事。
So there's the story about the great captain, the captain whose name was Great Compassion. So this was one of the past lives of the Buddha. He was a captain. We call it Taebyeon Yinji Chimbo in Tibetan. It means captain who's the great compassionate captain, you could say. So that was his name. He was a great bodhisattva, and he was a merchant. And he set out onto the ocean once to retrieve treasures from the ocean, because as a merchant, you need treasures to sell for the business. So he went to the ocean to retrieve treasures. And he went in a great ship, and in that merchants. And all of the 500 merchants were also bodhisattvas.
其中就可以想的一个公案，就是佛陀在因地的时候，是一个叫大卫商主的这样一个商人的一个船长。这个船长呢，他是一个菩萨，他当时航海的时候，就为了在海里获得珍宝。当时这个船上所有的其他的500个人也都是菩萨。
And in that ship, there was one person we call Minadong Dunjin. It means the dark, he was a person with dark complexion, so that's why we call him Minak. So dark person, or dark person with a dark complexion. And Dongtunjin, he was holding a spear. So that's why he's called a person with a dark complexion and holding a spear. Anyway, his name is Minadong Dunjin in Tibetan. So he was also in that ship. And these 500 bodhisattva merchants, along with the main bodhisattva, the captain, whose name was Compassionate, Great Compassion, they set sail and they retrieved the treasures. And while they were doing that, that person who was holding the spear, who had a spear with him, thought to himself that once everyone, all the merchants have gathered their treasures, have retrieved the treasures from the ocean, then I will kill all of them so I can take all of the treasures from my own keeping.
当时这个500个菩萨里面有一个人叫黑面，就是这个人就是他非常的黑心，他手里拿了一把小刀。当时这个船上的500个菩萨，加上这个大悲心的船长，他们出海了之后，这个黑心他就想着，等到所有的所有的商人都获得了他们的财宝之后，我就把他们都杀了，这样的话我能够获得全部人的所有的财宝。
And the captain figured out the intentions of that person. And the captain thought to himself, if that person with the spear kills all of the 500 merchants, because all the 500 merchants are bodhisattvas, that person would be accumulating a grave misdeed of killing bodhisattvas. And due to that, that person will end up being reborn and stuck in the hell realms and suffer there for a very long time. So the great captain developed compassion towards him and thought, how about instead I kill the person holding the spear first, so I can avoid him, so the whole situation where he kills the 500 bodhisattvas can be avoided, and therefore he won't be accumulating that misdeed, and there will not be the result of him having to experience suffering in the hell realms. So if I kill him, I might, because the act of killing is a misdeed, I might suffer for quite some time as a result, but that's not too bad. At least he won't be, creating or accumulating that grave misdeed, non-virtuous action of killing 500 bodhisattvas and won't have to suffer in hell. And so out of great compassion and thinking that the captain killed the person holding the spear, and when he did that, it was out of exchanging the happiness and suffering. He was putting the other person's happiness above his own suffering. And the captain was willing to take on whatever suffering that he would have to go through by accumulating the bad deed of killing the bad person, as long as the other person would not have to go through suffering.
当时这个船长就发现了这个拿刀的这个人的这个用意，他知道，而且这个商人这个船长他知道，船上的其他的500个都是菩萨，所以他就知道这个拿刀的人，如果他把这个500个商人都杀了的话，他就会堕入地狱，而且是长期待在地狱当中。于是船长就想，那为何我不把这个人杀了？这样子的话，我能够避免他能够免于因为杀了500个菩萨的这个罪业，而让他免于堕入地狱当中，感受无量痛苦的果报。这样子的话，我虽然自己杀了人，造了业，也会感受到恶报，但是相比起能够相比起能够避免这个拿刀的人去杀了500个菩萨的果报的话，一点都不差。所以当这个船长他以此发心的时候，他就把这个拿刀的这个人的快乐置在高地，就是只是去考虑到他的快乐，而不是去考虑自己的痛苦。这个船长他愿意去代受他人的痛苦，只要这个船长他愿意自己去受苦，只要能够让这个拿刀的这个人免于受苦。
So yes, generally, although the captain, of great knowledge, great compassion, killed the bad person, the act of killing is a bad deed, because the intention was good. It was exchanging his own happiness and taking that other person's suffering upon himself, or putting the other person's happiness up higher or more importance above his own, welfare, because he did that. Because he killed through the act of killing the bad person,
the Bodhisattva, known as Great Compassion, the merchant, quickly accumulated the accumulations quickly filled up, the accumulations of merit of his quickly filled up, and he got very close to enlightenment. He became much closer to enlightenment than he earlier was before he killed the bad person.
虽然这个船长他杀人这是一个恶业，但是因为他当时的发心是强烈的相换的，就是自他相换的心，想要去自己去受苦，而不愿意他人去受苦，把相比起自己的安乐，重视于他人的安乐。因此这样的发心的话，这个商主因为这样子的行为，很快就圆满了许许多多的资粮。这个就是说相比起他没有在杀人之前的话，因为他这个所做的这件事情，使他的资粮圆满到使他很快就要接近到正悟了。
So that is the example of the story. In short, the Bodhisattvas, what he's saying here is the Bodhisattvas should train in exchanging their happiness, giving their happiness to others and taking on the sufferings of others upon themselves.
简而言之的话，菩萨应该训练修持自他相换，也就是说去代受他人的痛苦，以及把自己的快乐交换给他人，使他人感受到快乐。
So that's it for today, and we can skip the questions because it is getting late. So we can now recite the prayers.
我们今天讲到这里，然后我们今天没有问答的环节，我们直接念回向偈。
Ma namga da nyambe simjen tamche lama sangye rinpo che la gyalsu chewo sangye chodan gende namla gyalsu chewo lama yidam kanje tsola gyalsu chewo rasim donsa chege gula gyalsu chewo ma namga da nyambe simjen tamche lama sangye rinpo che la gyalsu chewo Sangye chodan gende namla gyalsu chewo lama yedam kanje tsola gyalsu chewo ransem donsa chege gula gyalsu chewo ma namka da nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo chela gyalsu chewo sangye chodan gende namla gyalsu chewo lama yedam kanje tsola gyalsu chewo ransem donsa chege gula gyalsu che o mane be me ho o mane be me o mane be me ho o mane be me ho o mane be me ho o mane be me o mane be me ho o mane be me 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 Money be me, 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 mon 내단 로보라 겐레 규바에 된다 내단 중배 제와서 심제 예면 대외는 남근 지대 감소 중화라 마기로지 제다라 제메 티베 세자신 계제 지라드 셈타지 소조 내게 동라 지녀 바지대 감소 중화 마기로지 제다 신제 가난 지바다 내게 민삼 대베 다지 因接巴达大别人所跟律见跟拉那巴拉马古切那边给的当扎给举当罗布罗也做松家出去。西家在西那拉所巴因律见跟拉在瓦拉马古罗切，不是在瓦马律超节。中西周边东拉青年把马略西线当多等把，此类内面的给等把说那么跟着松间途径，看着去跟松面女的当你这路啊没别等到，我们啷到自助把拉说。那么把那小娃的也看见上所这边这个的绿箭那点那个老远小家送给对子他把他的你都中那三把嘞，一个程度高兴超过了的过了没说到把其实。开了所谓的把这拉那几把滚的高兴老远嘛。许多没事人前中年所讨论周三连接也罢呀。教育期限有多拉给了，几把滚来搞些老干嘛？开不拉多也都给成为看不滚来出边做人青年。对面七位那啥看话，因几把滚来搞些老干嘛？每当面面那在身边被三十了准备吃住了解锁这位大自然能不？名额因素全是老干嘛？太大了，就这样跑马老干。嘛，最近这边一个说他，现在送的去个嘛头把这个开结束送就过去。那么一旦上个长生所教育让咱教师做起了，这些动物养个说的那一拉没别对的有主子，看到我个往北养的到过年看我对家干呗，说那把多全把老爷。大家记得小老说话的，你的记得这样局面，看了加上记得给我我查了是。米姐记得看见罗巴呢，对面书包的那几页做，天那拉的大个拉怎么？现在那边我个拉子说呢，最近那边国美中间把看到学生那样有钱。这个老妈那么也请老大，那就人家这边领导。电边我大把的撒家被路上给来出去看球去，把的在外拉马人不去，大概几乎的被没得说的，搞成前边过年结束，过送图给我就早都说。前面没写说为过看那前面再见了么？前天嘛，前面在老王为做南边，前面在野外住早都说，人说边面土也拉拉呢，看在你腿上说你没了钱，撒点弄到别脏。也在那多家那些个多，大胆说我往有住哪里，看见东这个个在台前，东阿拉偏的把多把位，前来给上边往也要不，小的说南大前的是来给。撒些老头上官别人前，多罗芒子车子中当间的，帮人给教出的我两不，但学所教我你把节子，恐怕年教的几年给，才么些教为lâm上什么。罗些能要我提醒的在小点所变作要塞的也，这些把的啥也去些，巴拉巴拉年那着咱们这边，监督全些上送多钱，大点所路面拉马出送，途街当。也当的所要做土多当。去年沙漠有没 Tembe tu chi da so be de gyuro chi. So, Nama Di Ye Tan Je Se Ba Yin To Ne Nye Ben Da Na Pam Che Ne Ge Ga Na Che Ba Lo Chu Ba Ye Se Be Tso Le Jo Ba Sho Jambea Bave Chedai Kema Dai Gundu Sambo Te Yang Te Shin Te Dai Gungi Jesu Da Lo Jingi Wai De Da Tam Che Rabu Tu son shebe gyawa tamche ye ngowai kan la chodo nga ba de pa ge gebe zawai de ge kyan sambo che che ra do ngowai Cha cho yo ve kyo bai cho kyo bai ke jo ya zi yo su ka ve ne ka re che de den ba sa zi ba sa ya ba ye den ba gen gyu jing Kang chen pe ge de wa do je den ba den sa ke che se ba gyu ji zhe be dong ge gen che me pa dang gen yang chen de Nam ka nyam ba sho. Thank you.